Hey, everyone, picture this. I'm Claire Bennett, 30 years old, a sergeant in the US Army, standing in my barracks, counting down the hours until I board a plane home for Christmas. It's been 10 long years since I last saw my family in Franklin, Tennessee, 10 years of missed holidays, birthdays, and Sunday dinners. I've survived basic training, dodged bullets in Iraq, and earned a Silver Star for saving my squad. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment my phone lit up with a text from my dad, Richard Bennett, just 3 days before my flight. The words burned into my screen, "Don't come home. You're not welcome." My heart stopped. I read it again, thinking it was a mistake. This was my dad, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who cheered at my soccer games. But there it was, cold and final, like a door slamming shut. I typed back one word, "Fine." That single word carried a decade of hurt, anger, and defiance. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but oh, you won't believe what I uncovered next. Before I dive into this story, and trust me, it's a wild ride, I want you to drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Are you in New York, London, or maybe a small town like mine? And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you're not gonna want to miss how this family drama explodes into a scandal that shook my entire world. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Felt like your whole life was a lie? That's where I was, staring at my phone, wondering if the family I'd fought for even wanted me. Stick with me, because what started as a heartbreaking rejection led to a secret so shocking it changed everything I thought I knew about my father, my home, and myself. This is the story of how one text broke my family, and how I fought to rebuild my life. Let's get into it. Growing up in Franklin, Tennessee, our family, the Bennetts, was the kind of picture-perfect you'd see in a Southern Living magazine spread. Our colonial-style mansion sat on a hill overlooking the rolling green fields, its wraparound porch adorned with rocking chairs that creaked in the summer breeze. From the outside, we were the American dream. My father, Richard Bennett, a titan of the real estate world, had built Bennett Properties into a powerhouse that shaped Franklin's skyline. His name was on billboards, charity galas, even the local high school's new auditorium. My mother, Linda, was the elegant former artist who traded her paintbrushes for PTA meetings and hosting lavish dinner parties for Dad's clients. My older brother, Ethan, 32, was the golden boy, groomed from diapers to inherit Dad's empire, with his charm and tailored suits already winning over boardrooms. My younger sister, Sophia, 26, was the brainiac, racking up academic awards and aiming for a PhD in neuroscience, the pride of every family gathering. And then there was me, Claire, the middle child, always the odd piece in the Bennett puzzle. I wasn't like Ethan, who could recite Dad's business strategies by age 12, or Sophia, who'd rather dissect a textbook than join the cheer squad. I was the kid sneaking out to watch ROTC drills at the community center, fascinated by the precision, the purpose, the way soldiers moved as one. I'd come home with mud on my sneakers, dreaming of dog tags, while Dad lectured me about carrying the Bennett legacy. By high school, the tension was palpable. Dinner tables became battlegrounds. "Claire, why can't you be more like Ethan?" Dad would say, his voice sharp as he sliced his steak. "Bennett Properties is your future, too." Mom would try to soften the blow, her smile strained. "Honey, your father just wants what's best." But I didn't want boardrooms or gala dresses. I wanted to serve, to find something bigger than Franklin's gilded cage. The breaking point came the summer after my senior year. I'd been accepted to Vanderbilt, Dad's alma mater, with a deposit already paid for their business program. But I'd also been meeting with an Army recruiter in secret, my heart set on enlisting. One humid July evening, I gathered the courage to tell them. The dining room was silent except for the clink of Mom's wine glass as I said, "I'm not going to Vanderbilt. I'm joining the Army." Dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen, his fork hitting the plate like a gavel. "No daughter of mine is throwing her life away to play soldier," he roared, standing so fast his chair scraped the hardwood. Mom gasped, "Richard, please," but her voice was drowned out. Ethan stared at his plate, avoiding my eyes. Sophia, only 16, started to cry, her napkin twisted in her hands. "You think you're better than this family?" Dad continued, his voice booming. "Everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed, and you spit in my face for some grunt's life." I stood my ground, my hands trembling behind my back. "It's my choice, Dad. I ship out in August." His eyes narrowed, cold as steel. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. You're no Bennett if you choose that path." Mom reached for his arm, pleading, "She's our daughter," but he shook her off. "She's made her bed." That night, I packed a single duffel bag, my heart pounding with equal parts fear and resolve. Sophia slipped into my room, hugging me tightly, whispering, "I'm proud of you," but Ethan didn't say goodbye. Mom pressed a locket into my hand, tears in her eyes, but Dad was nowhere to be found when I left at dawn. As I drove away, the mansion shrinking in my rearview mirror, I felt like I was cutting myself out of the family portrait. Franklin's golden child was now an outcast, trading a life of privilege for push-ups in the dirt. Over the next decade, I'd learn what it meant to belong, to a squad, to a mission, but the sting of Dad's words never fully faded. They echoed every time I saw a Christmas card signed "The Bennett Family" without my name, every time Mom's cautious holiday calls avoided mentioning him. I thought I'd left the Bennett legacy behind, but I didn't know then that my choice to serve would become the key to a secret Dad was hiding, a secret that would threaten to destroy everything he'd built and drag me down with it. What I didn't see coming was how deep the cracks in our family ran, hidden behind the polished facade of Franklin's elite. Dad's empire wasn't just a business, it was a house of cards, and my absence had left a hole he'd fill with lies. But that's a story for the next part of this journey. Stay with me, because what I found when I tried to come home was worse than rejection, it was betrayal on a scale I never imagined. Leaving Franklin, Tennessee, felt like shedding a skin that never quite fit. At 18, I stepped off the bus at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, my heart heavier with Dad's final words, "You're no Bennett." Basic training was a crucible, 10 weeks of screaming drill sergeants, pre-dawn runs, and obstacle courses that left my muscles screaming louder than my doubts. The Army didn't care about my last name or the mansion I'd left behind. It demanded one thing, grit. And I had plenty of that. By week 3, I'd earned the nickname of Bulldog for my refusal to quit, even when my lungs burned and my boots sank into the mud. For the first time, I wasn't Claire, the disappointing Bennett daughter. I was Private Bennett, part of something bigger than myself. It was there I met Sarah Brooks, a wiry recruit from Chicago with a laugh that could cut through the chaos of the barracks. She caught me struggling with a rifle drill one evening, my fingers clumsy from exhaustion. "Yo, Bulldog, you're holding that like it's gonna bite you," she teased, adjusting my grip. We clicked instantly, bonded by late-night talks about escaping our pasts, her from a rough neighborhood, me from a gilded cage. Sarah became my anchor, the sister I'd always wanted but never found in Sophia. Together, we survived the grind of training, graduated with squared shoulders, and got assigned to the same unit in Fort Bragg. My first deployment came in 2017, a year-long stint in Iraq that tested every ounce of my resolve. The heat was relentless, 120 degrees baking the sand into a shimmering haze. Our unit patrolled dusty roads, escorted supply convoys, and trained local forces. Danger was a constant hum, IEDs, sniper fire, the weight of knowing one wrong step could end it all. But I found my stride under pressure. During a routine patrol near Mosul, our convoy hit an ambush. Insurgents opened fire from a rooftop, pinning us down as bullets tore through the Humvee ahead. My training kicked in. I radioed for support, rallied my squad, and led a flank to suppress the enemy, dragging 2 wounded locals to safety while Sarah laid down cover fire. We held the line until air support arrived, saving 15 lives, including those civilians. That night, shaking in my bunk, Sarah handed me a lukewarm soda. "You're a badass, bulldog," she said, her grin hiding the fear we both felt. The Army awarded me the Silver Star, a medal I pinned to my uniform with pride but mailed home in a plain envelope, hoping it might soften Dad's heart. It didn't. Mom called, her voice thick with tears, saying she'd framed the newspaper clipping. Sophia sent a handwritten note, "You're my hero." Ethan texted a curt, "Nice job." From Dad, nothing, just the same silence that had followed me since I left. The distance grew over the years. Deployments to Kuwait and Syria kept me moving, each mission sharpening my instincts and earning me promotions. By 2025, at 30, I was a sergeant, respected for my cool head and fierce loyalty to my team. Sarah and I had racked up countless stories, midnight card games in dusty tents, dodging scorpions, betting Maries on who could do more push-ups. But the homesickness lingered, a quiet ache that surfaced during rare downtime, when I'd stare at the stars and wonder if Franklin still felt like home. My only steady link to the Bennetts was Grandma Margaret, who sent letters on crisp, lavender-scented stationery. "Your grandfather was a Marine," she wrote after my promotion to sergeant. "He'd be proud, Claire, no matter what your father says." Her words were a lifeline, especially when Mom's holiday calls grew shorter, always tiptoeing around Dad's name. Sophia's updates about her neuroscience studies were polite but distant. Ethan's Christmas cards, signed "The Bennett Family," felt like a formality, a reminder I was an outsider. When Grandma Margaret suffered a minor stroke in October 2025, I knew it was time to go back. I requested leave, my commanding officer, Captain Laura Hayes, nodding with understanding. "Family's messy, Bennett," she said. "But you can't run from it forever." I let myself hope as I packed my bags, imagining a Christmas where Dad might finally see me, not as a failure, but as the soldier who'd carved her own path. I bought gifts, a hand-painted canvas for Mom, a leather-bound planner for Ethan, a neuroscience journal for Sophia, a cashmere shawl for Grandma. I was ready to bridge the gap, to prove I was still a Bennett. But that hope shattered with Dad's text, a betrayal that cut deeper than any ambush. What I didn't know then was that my Army career, the one he despised, was the key to a secret he'd buried, a secret that would unravel our family in ways I never saw coming. The barracks at Fort Bragg were quiet that December evening in 2025, the kind of stillness that amplifies every thought. I was folding my uniform, my plane ticket to Nashville tucked in my pocket, when my phone buzzed on the bunk. The screen lit up with "Dad," a name I hadn't seen in years. My pulse quickened. After a decade of silence, maybe this was the olive branch I'd been waiting for, the sign that Christmas in Franklin, Tennessee, could heal the rift. I opened the message, and the words hit like a grenade, "Don't come home. You're not welcome." Each syllable was a shard of glass, slicing through the hope I'd carried from Iraq to Syria and back. I read it again, then a third time, willing it to be a mistake. But there it was, Richard Bennett's verdict, as cold and final as a judge's gavel. My hands shook as I typed back one word, "Fine." It wasn't just a reply, it was a wall slamming down, sealing off a decade of longing for his approval. I sat there, staring at the phone, the weight of rejection crushing my chest. Sarah Brooks found me like that, her usual smirk fading when she saw my face. "Bennett, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed her the phone without a word. She read the text, her jaw tightening. "Your dad's got some nerve," she muttered, tossing it back. "You're still going, right?" I shook my head, the gifts I'd packed, Mom's canvas, Ethan's planner, Sophia's journal, Grandma Margaret's shawl, now feeling like relics of a naive dream. "He doesn't want me there, Sarah. What's the point?" She grabbed my duffel, shoving my boots inside. The point is you're Claire freaking Bennett, Silver Star badass. You don't need his permission to go home. Her words sparked something, not hope, but defiance. I wasn't going to crawl back to Franklin begging for a seat at the Bennett table. Instead, I'd go on my terms. I scoured rental listings and found a small cabin on the outskirts of Franklin, nestled by Harpeth River, a rustic retreat far from the mansion's shadow. I rerouted my flight, notified Captain Hayes, and packed my gear, the word "fine" echoing in my mind like a battle cry. As the plane descended over Tennessee's rolling hills, I braced for a homecoming that felt more like stepping into a minefield. The cabin was nothing like the Bennett estate, no chandeliers or manicured lawns, just creaky floorboards and a wood stove that sputtered like it held a grudge. I dropped my bag and drove to a local grocery store for supplies, my mind replaying Dad's text. As I debated between coffee brands, a familiar voice cut through the aisle's hum. "Claire. Claire Bennett, is that you?" It was Lauren Parker, my high school best friend, her auburn curls now tied back, a toddler on her hip. We hugged, the kind of embrace that bridges years in seconds. "When did you get back?" she asked, eyes wide. "Just today," I said, keeping it vague. "On leave for Christmas." Lauren's smile faltered, reading the tension in my voice. "You're not staying at the mansion, are you?" I shook my head, admitting I'd rented the cabin. Her expression shifted, like she was piecing together a puzzle. "Claire, there's been talk in town," she said, lowering her voice as her toddler tugged at her sleeve. "Your dad's company, it's not what it used to be. People say Bennett Properties is in deep trouble, debts, weird government contracts. My cousin worked for them until Richard fired half the crew without warning." My stomach twisted. "What kind of contracts?" I pressed. She hesitated, glancing around. "Big military projects, the kind you'd need serious clearance for. Nobody knows how he pulled it off, but it's shady, Claire." Her words landed like a warning shot. I'd assumed Dad's empire was untouchable, but Lauren's gossip hinted at cracks I hadn't seen. Back at the cabin, I unpacked, my military instincts kicking in, assess, analyze, act. Why would Dad, who'd scorned my army career, suddenly dive into military contracts? And why now, after years of silence, did he feel the need to ban me from coming home? The answers were out there, hidden in Franklin's polished streets, and I was determined to find them. But first, I'd have to face the town that knew me as Richard Bennett's rebel daughter, and the family that had already written me off. What I didn't know was that Dad's text wasn't just a rejection, it was the first move in a game I was already caught in. The Harpeth River murmured outside my rented cabin in Franklin, Tennessee, its steady flow a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. It was my second day back, and the sting of Dad's text, "Don't come home. You're not welcome," still burned, but Lauren Parker's words at the grocery store had lit a fuse. Bennett Properties, my father's real estate empire, was in trouble, tangled in shady military contracts that didn't add up. As a sergeant who'd spent a decade navigating war zones, I knew a red flag when I saw one. My military instincts screamed, something was wrong, and Dad's rejection felt less like personal spite and more like a calculated move to keep me away. I wasn't here to beg for a family reunion anymore. I was here to uncover the truth. I started with Grandma Margaret, the only Bennett who'd never turned her back on me. Her cottage, a cozy haven tucked behind Franklin's historic district, smelled of lavender and fresh-baked cornbread. She greeted me with a hug, her frail frame belying the fire in her eyes. "Claire, you should have told me you were coming," she scolded, leaning on her cane. Rachel's mom spilled the beans. I managed to smile, settling into her armchair. "Small towns, huh?" But her face grew serious as she poured tea. "Why the cabin, dear? Why not the mansion?" I hesitated, then showed her Dad's text. Her lips tightened, and she set her cup down hard enough to rattle the saucer. Your father's always been a stubborn fool, but this is different. Different how? I pressed, leaning forward. Grandma Margaret sighed, her gaze drifting to a framed photo of my grandfather, a Marine who'd served in Vietnam. Bennett Properties is bleeding money, Claire. Richard's been cagey, locking himself in his office, barking orders at Linda, Ethan, even Sophia. He's controlling every move they make, checking their phones, their schedules. It's not just pride anymore. He's desperate. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Lauren mentioned military contracts, I said carefully. Big ones. You know anything about that? She frowned, her knuckles widening on her cane. I've heard whispers. Projects for army bases, storage depots, high-security stuff. Richard bragged about landing them, but he clammed up when I asked how. Said it was confidential. My gut twisted. Military contracts of that scale required top-level security clearance, the kind I'd earned after my second tour in Syria. Dad had no military background, no access to that world, unless he'd found a way to exploit mine. The thought made my blood run cold, but I needed more than whispers. Grandma, can you keep this between us? I asked, standing. She nodded, her eyes sharp. Be careful, Claire. Your father's not the man he used to be. Back at the cabin, I fired up my laptop, digging into public records on Bennett Properties. The shift was stark. 5 years ago, Dad had pivoted from luxury condos to government contracts, barracks, training facilities, even a classified drone storage site. The numbers didn't lie. These deals were worth millions, far beyond what his struggling firm should have landed. Local news archives mentioned competitors crying foul, alleging underhanded bidding, but investigations mysteriously fizzled. Something, or someone, was greasing the wheels. My investigation was interrupted by a knock at the door. I peered through the window, expecting a delivery, but saw a man in a flannel shirt, toolbox in hand. Jake Miller, he introduced himself, his Tennessee drawl warm but cautious. Rental agency sent me to fix your flickering lights. I let him in, watching as he worked, his hands steady but his eyes darting to my dog tags on the coffee table. Army, huh? He asked, tightening a wire. 10 years, I said, keeping my tone neutral. My brother was Marines. You Richard Bennett's daughter, right? I nodded, bracing for the usual small-town deference to Dad's name. Instead, Jake's face darkened. Heard you were back. Town's buzzing. Buzzing about what? I asked, crossing my arms. He wiped his hands on a rag, hesitating. Look, I don't like gossip, but your dad's made enemies. His company's been snapping up military contracts left and right, outbidding folks with better resumes. Word is, he's got an inside track, someone with serious clearance signing off. My heart skipped a beat. Inside track. I echoed, keeping my voice steady. Jake shrugged, packing his tools. Just talk. But my buddy lost his firm competing against Bennett. Said Richard's bids were impossibly low, like he knew exactly what to offer. Shady as hell. His words hit like a sniper's bullet. Security clearance wasn't handed out like candy, it was earned through years of service, vetted by the Pentagon. I'd gotten mine in 2020, a requirement for sensitive missions in Syria. Dad had no business anywhere near that world, unless he'd somehow tied my name to his schemes. The idea was unthinkable, but Jake's story aligned too perfectly with Grandma's warnings and Lauren's gossip. I thanked him, my mind racing as he left, his truck's taillights fading into the dusk. That night, I couldn't sleep, the cabin's creaky walls amplifying my unease. I pulled out my secure military phone, tempted to call Captain Hayes, but stopped. I needed hard evidence, not just suspicion. Instead, I mapped out my next steps, tracked down public contract filings, talked to anyone who'd worked with Bennett Properties, and watched for signs Dad was hiding more than a failing business. As I jotted notes, a shadow moved outside my window, a black SUV idling across the road, its headlights off. My training kicked in. I dimmed my laptop, grabbed my flashlight, and crept to the porch. The SUV's engine revved, and it peeled away before I could see the driver, but the message was clear: someone was watching me. My breath caught, adrenaline spiking. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. Dad's text, the contracts, the surveillance, it all pointed to a secret he'd go to extremes to protect. I'd faced ambushes in Iraq, but this felt different, more personal. Franklin, the town I'd once called home, was starting to feel like hostile territory, and my own father was the one drawing the battle lines. I didn't know it then, but I was one step away from uncovering a betrayal so deep it would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about the Bennetts. The cabin by the Harpeth River felt smaller each day, its walls closing in as my suspicions about Dad's schemes grew. After Jake Miller's visit and spotting that black SUV, Franklin, Tennessee, no longer felt like home. It felt like a chessboard, and I was a pawn in a game I didn't yet understand. Grandma Margaret's warnings about Bennett Properties' troubles and Jake's talk of shady military contracts pointed to one thing: Dad was hiding something big, and my Army credentials might be at the heart of it. I needed answers, and the only people who might have them were the siblings I hadn't seen in a decade, Ethan and Sophia. But confronting them meant walking back into the Bennett family minefield, where every word could detonate years of buried resentment. My first chance came at the Brew, a trendy coffee shop in Franklin's historic downtown, where fairy lights twinkled against exposed brick walls. I'd stopped for a latte, my laptop open to more contract filings, when I saw Sophia through the window, hunched over a table, her once vibrant curls limp and her eyes shadowed by dark circles. The academic star I'd known was gone, replaced by someone who flinched at the barista's shout. I approached, my boots soft on the hardwood. "Sophia." Her head snapped up, and for a moment, I thought she'd bolt. "Claire," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're really here." I gestured to the empty chair. "Can I sit?" She glanced at the door, then nodded, her fingers twisting the edge of her scarf. Up close, Sophia looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, her nails bitten raw. "How's school?" I asked, easing in. "Neuroscience still your thing?" Her laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "School's fine," she lied, her eyes darting away. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "Grandma Margaret told me you dropped out." "What's going on, Soph?" Her face paled, and she gripped her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Don't tell Dad, please," she begged, her voice barely audible. "He doesn't know." I pressed, my gut tightening. She shook her head, tears welling. "He'd kill me, Claire. You know how he is, everything has to be perfect. Ethan's the heir, I'm the brain, and you." She stopped, wincing. "The disappointment," I finished, the word tasting like ash. Sophia's silence was answer enough. "What's happening with the family, Sophia?" I asked, my tone softening but insistent. "Grandma said Dad's controlling everyone, and I heard about military contracts." "What's he doing?" She stiffened, her eyes flicking to the door again. "I can't talk about this," she said, grabbing her bag. "Dad would," she cut herself off, but the fear in her voice was unmistakable. "Dad would what?" I demanded, my patience thinning. She stood, her chair scraping loudly, drawing stares. "He's not himself, Claire. Stay away, for your own sake." Before I could stop her, she was gone, the bell above the door jingling as she fled into the twilight, leaving me with more questions than answers. The next encounter was less planned, more raw. I found Ethan at the Rusty Spur, a dive bar on the edge of Franklin where neon signs buzzed and the air smelled of stale beer. He was slumped at the counter, a whiskey glass sweating in his hand, his tailored jacket wrinkled like he'd slept in it. The golden boy I'd grown up with, confident, Dad's mirror image, was a wreck, his eyes bloodshot and his stubble patchy. I slid onto the stool beside him, signaling the bartender for a soda. "Rough night, stranger," I said, keeping my tone light. Ethan startled, nearly spilling his drink. "Claire," he slurred, a lopsided grin flickering. "The war hero returns." We traded small talk for a while, but the whiskey loosened his tongue faster than I expected. "You were smart to get out," he said, staring into his glass. "This family's a sinking ship." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean, Ethan? What's going on with Bennett Properties?" He laughed, a hollow sound. "Properties? It's a house of cards, sis. Dad overreached, took on contracts we couldn't handle. I screwed up some investments, big time. We're drowning." I leaned closer, my voice steady despite the alarm bells in my head. "Lauren mentioned military contracts. How's Dad pulling those off?" Ethan's grin faded, and he drained his glass. "You don't want to know," he muttered, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of guilt. "Tell me," I pressed, my voice low, commanding, the sergeant taking over. He sighed, rubbing his face. "Dad found a way to game the system. Big army projects, barracks, depots, classified stuff. Needed clearance we didn't have. He got creative." My heart pounded, the pieces clicking into place. "Creative how?" I asked, dreading the answer. Ethan looked at me, his gaze unsteady but piercing. "Your name came up a lot, Claire. That's all I'll say." The words hit like a punch, confirming my worst fear. Dad was using my military credentials, my clearance, to secure contracts. I gripped the bar to steady myself. "You knew?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "And you let him?" Ethan shrugged, defeated. "What choice did I have? He's Dad." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, *Harpeth Diner, 8 p.m. "Come alone." "Mom?" My breath caught. Mom, who'd always played peacemaker, was reaching out in secret, and the timing felt too precise to be coincidence. I stood, tossing cash on the bar. "We're not done, Ethan," I said, my voice cold. He didn't look up, just ordered another drink, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his own complicity. As I drove to the cabin to prepare for the meeting, my mind raced. Sophia's fear, Ethan's guilt, the SUV tailing me, it all pointed to a conspiracy centered on my identity as a soldier. Dad wasn't just rejecting me, he was protecting a lie, one that had kept Bennett Properties afloat while I risked my life overseas. The diner meeting with Mom loomed like a tipping point, a chance to uncover the full scope of Dad's betrayal. But as I parked and checked my surroundings, my training kicking in, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. Whatever waited at that diner, it would change everything. The Harpeth Diner, a weathered roadside joint 30 minutes outside Franklin, Tennessee, glowed faintly under a flickering neon sign as I pulled into the gravel lot. It was 7:45 p.m., and the winter sky was a bruise of purple and black, the air sharp with the promise of snow. Mom's text, *Harpeth Diner, 8 p.m. Come alone*, had come hours after Ethan's drunken confession at the Rusty Spur, where he'd let slip that Dad had used my name to secure shady military contracts. Sophia's fear at the coffee shop, Grandma Margaret's warnings, Jake Miller's gossip, and that black SUV tailing me all pointed to a truth I could no longer ignore. Dad's rejection wasn't just personal. It was a desperate move to keep me from uncovering a lie that propped up Bennett Properties. As a sergeant who'd faced ambushes in Iraq, I knew how to read a battlefield, and this diner felt like one. I parked with a clear view of both exits, my military instincts on high alert, and waited for Mom to show. Inside, the diner was a time capsule, checkered floors, vinyl booths, the smell of burnt coffee and fried onions. I chose a corner booth, my back to the wall, and ordered a black coffee to steady my nerves. The waitress, a tired woman with a name tag reading Doris, gave me a curious glance, likely recognizing the Bennett name in a town where it carried weight. My phone stayed dark, no word from Mom, but Ethan's words echoed. Your name came up a lot, Claire. My Army security clearance, earned through years of sweat and sacrifice, was the key to Dad's contracts he had no right to touch. The betrayal cut deeper than his text telling me not to come home, but I needed proof, and Mom's secretive meeting was my best shot at getting it. At exactly 8 o'clock, a silver sedan pulled up, and Mom stepped out, her camel coat pristine despite the gravel dust. Linda Bennett, always the picture of grace, moved with a nervous energy I'd never seen, her eyes scanning the lot before she entered. She spotted me and slid into the booth, her hands fidgeting with her gloves. Claire, she said, her voice a fragile thread, you look strong. The compliment felt hollow, a reflex from years of smoothing over Dad's storms. Why the secrecy, Mom? I asked, cutting to the chase. And why's Dad got you jumping through hoops to meet me? Her face crumpled, new lines etched around her mouth. He doesn't know I'm here, she whispered, glancing at the door. He tracks my phone, my car's GPS. I told him I was at a book club in Nashville. My coffee went cold as she spoke, her words painting a picture of a family under siege. Your father's not well, Claire, she said, her voice trembling. He's obsessed, paranoid. He blames you for everything, the business, Ethan's failures, Sophia's struggles. When he found out you were coming home, he lost it. Said it would ruin everything. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. Ruin what, Mom? The military contracts. The ones he's using my clearance for. Her eyes widened, a deer caught in headlights, and for a moment, I thought she'd run. You know, she breathed, her hands shaking. I know enough, I said, my anger simmering. Ethan let it slip. Dad's been gaming the system, using my name to win bids he had no business touching. What I don't know is how deep this goes, or why you're letting him. Mom's tears spilled over, but she didn't look away. I didn't know at first, she said, her voice breaking. He started locking his office, working late, hiding papers. I thought it was just stress. The recession hit us hard, Claire. But then I saw your name on a contract, a signature that wasn't yours. I confronted him, and he said it was the only way to save us. Her words were a gut punch, confirmation of my worst fears. Dad had forged my signature, turning my service into a tool for his fraud. Save you by sacrificing me? I asked, my voice rising despite the diner's quiet hum. He's setting me up, Mom. If those contracts get audited, I'm the one who takes the fall. My career, my reputation, maybe even prison. Mom flinched, her hands twisting her scarf. I told him it was wrong, she said, barely audible. But he said you'd never find out, that you'd stay away. When you booked your leave, he panicked. That's why the text. I sat back, the pieces snapping into place. Dad's "don't come home" wasn't just cruelty, it was a firewall to protect his lie. But I'd breached it, and now he was scrambling. Before I could press further, my phone buzzed, a new email from an anonymous sender, no subject. I opened it, my blood running cold, a scanned document, my forged signature scrawled across a Pentagon contract for a classified Army depot, dated when I was deployed in Syria. Attached was a single line, *check Richard safe. Margaret, *grandma had been busy, and this was dynamite, proof Dad's fraud went beyond bids to federal crimes. I showed Mom the screen, her face draining of color. He kept saying it was for the family, she whispered, tears streaming. But it's tearing us apart. You need to leave, Claire, she said suddenly, standing, her voice urgent. It's not safe. He's watching everyone, me, Ethan, Sophia. If he knows you're digging, she didn't finish, but the fear in her eyes said enough. I grabbed her wrist, my grip gentle but firm. I'm not running, Mom. Not this time. Help me stop him. She pulled away, shaking her head. I've done what I can. Please, just go. She fled the diner, her coat flapping as she vanished into the night, leaving me with the document and a choice, retreat or fight. Back at the cabin, I printed the email, my hand steady despite the rage boiling inside. Grandma's note about the safe was a lead, but getting to it meant infiltrating the mansion, Dad's fortress. As I planned my next move, a text from Sarah Brooks lit up my phone, asterisk heard you're stirring up trouble, bulldog. Need backup? Asterisk I smiled, her loyalty a lifeline. But this was my war, and the battle was just beginning. What I didn't know was that Dad's next move would push our family past the point of no return. The drive to Franklin General Hospital felt like a mission in hostile territory, the neon glow of Franklin, Tennessee's downtown fading into the rearview mirror. It was just past midnight, hours after my confrontation with Mom at the Harpeth Diner, where she'd confirmed Dad's fraud, forging my Army security clearance to secure millions in military contracts. Grandma Margaret's emailed proof, a contract with my falsified signature, burned in my mind, tucked into my jacket as I sped through the winter chill. But before I could act, my phone had erupted with 22 missed calls, 6 from Mom, 8 from Sophia, 4 from Ethan, 3 from Grandma, and 1 from Stephen Carter, Dad's lawyer. The voicemails were a crescendo of panic. Claire, it's Mom, call me now. Sis, Dad's in the hospital, it's bad, from Ethan. Sophia's voice trembled. He collapsed. Claire, please come. The last, from Carter, was clipped. Miss Bennett, we need to speak urgently. Dad had suffered a stroke, and the timing, right after my diner meeting, felt like no coincidence. I gripped the steering wheel, my soldier's instinct screaming. This was a turning point, and I was walking into a storm. The hospital's ER waiting room was a stark contrast to the Bennett mansion's opulence. Fluorescent lights buzzed, plastic chairs creaked, and the air smelled of antiseptic and fear. My family was a fractured tableau. Mom sat rigid, her makeup flawless but her hands twisting a tissue to shreds. Sophia paced, her phone clutched like a lifeline, her eyes red from crying. Ethan slouched by a vending machine, reeking of whiskey, his tie loosened like a noose. They froze when I entered, my combat boots echoing on the linoleum. How is he? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. Sophia answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Stable, for now. They're prepping for emergency surgery, blockage in his brain. Her eyes narrowed, venom creeping in. What did you do, Claire? The accusation hit like a slap. Excuse me. I said, stepping closer. Sophia's hands balled into fists. Dad was fine until you showed up, digging into things that don't concern you. He got a text from you, threatening to go to the cops, and collapsed 20 minutes later. My blood ran cold. I didn't send any text, I said, my voice low, dangerous. Ethan staggered forward, his breath sour. Don't lie, Claire. He showed us. I know what you did, I'm telling the authorities. You trying to kill him. The room spun, my mind racing. A forged text, just like my forged signature. Dad was playing chess, even from a hospital bed, painting me as the villain to cover his tracks. I didn't send it, I repeated, my voice rising, drawing a nurse's glare. But I know what Dad's been doing, using my clearance to scam military contracts, forging my name to save his sinking empire. And you all let him. The waiting room went silent, the weight of my words landing like a grenade. Mom's tissue fell to the floor, her face ashen. "Claire, that's not true," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan's eyes darted away, guilt written in his slumped shoulders. Sophia's mouth opened, then closed, her anger faltering. They knew, maybe not the details, but enough to suspect. And they'd done nothing. Before I could press further, Stephen Carter appeared in the doorway, his tailored suit out of place amid the hospital's chaos. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice smooth but edged, "a word, please." I followed him to a quiet corridor, my hand brushing the printed contract in my jacket. Carter, Dad's lawyer for 3 decades, stood tall, his silver hair catching the fluorescent light. "Your father's condition is critical," he began, his eyes studying me. "A stroke, likely stress-induced. He received a threatening message from you." I cut him off, my voice steel. "I didn't send it. Just like I didn't sign those contracts Dad used to defraud the Pentagon." His composure flickered, a crack in his polished facade. I pulled out the printed email from Grandma Margaret, thrusting it into his hands. "This is my signature, forged on a classified Army Depot contract, dated when I was dodging IEDs in Syria. Dad's been using my clearance to win bids, and now he's framing me to take the fall." Carter's eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening. "These are serious allegations," he said, his tone measured. "Your father was under immense pressure, trying to save the family business." I stepped closer, my voice a low growl. "He committed fraud, Carter. Federal crimes. And you're standing here defending him." He didn't flinch, but his silence was answer enough. A commotion erupted down the hall, Mom's cry, nurses rushing toward Dad's room. "He's seizing." Sophia's voice echoed. For a split second, I saw the man who'd carried me on his shoulders at 4th of July parades, not the one who'd betrayed me. But the contract in Carter's hands grounded me. "I'm calling my JAG officer," I said, pulling out my secure phone. "This ends now." Carter's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. "Think carefully, Claire. This could destroy your family." I yanked free, my eyes blazing. Dad did that already. As I dialed Captain Hayes, the hospital's chaos faded, my focus razor sharp. Dad's stroke wasn't just a health crisis, it was his last gambit to control the narrative. But I wasn't the outcast daughter anymore. I was Sergeant Bennett, and I'd fight to clear my name, no matter the cost. The fluorescent lights of the Portland Federal Building buzzed overhead as I sat in a stark conference room, the weight of the past week pressing on my shoulders. It was December 28, 2025, just hours after the hospital showdown where I'd confronted my family with Dad's fraud, forging my Army security clearance to secure military contracts. Grandma Margaret's emailed proof, a contract bearing my falsified signature, had been the spark, and my accusation in front of Mom, Ethan, Sophia, and Dad's lawyer, Stephen Carter, had lit the fuse. Dad's stroke, triggered by a fabricated text he claimed was from me, was in surgery, but I couldn't wait for his recovery to act. My career, my honor, and maybe my freedom were at stake. As a sergeant who'd faced combat, I knew hesitation could be fatal. I'd called Captain Laura Hayes, my commanding officer, and within hours, I was meeting with JAG Corps attorneys, ready to dismantle Dad's lies. Major Daniel Torres, a no-nonsense JAG officer with a crew cut and sharp eyes, spread Grandma's documents across the table, contracts, bidding records, emails, all stamped with my forged signature. "This is identity theft, fraud, and potential espionage if classified data was mishandled," he said, his voice clipped. "You did right bringing this to us, Sergeant Bennett." I nodded, my jaw tight, the printed contract from the Harpeth Diner meeting with Mom still vivid in my mind. "What's next, sir?" I asked, my hand steady despite the storm inside. Torres leaned forward. "We're coordinating with the FBI. They were already sniffing around Bennett Properties for irregular bids. Your evidence blows this wide open. Richard Bennett and any accomplices will face questioning, maybe prosecution. His gaze softened. This is your family, Claire. You sure you're ready for what comes next? I've been ready since he told me not to come home, I said, my voice firm, echoing the "fine" I'd texted back. The room hummed with urgency as Torres outlined the plan, my testimony, Grandma's documents, and digital forensics to trace the forgeries would build an airtight case. By dawn, the FBI had frozen Bennett Properties accounts, seizing servers from Dad's office in Franklin's gleaming downtown. The news hit like a shockwave. Local headlines screamed, "Bennett Empire under fire," and Franklin's gossip mill churned. I stayed at the cabin, avoiding the hospital, my phone off to block the flood of calls from reporters and distant cousins. The legal gears ground fast. Carter, Dad's lawyer, scrambled to negotiate, but the evidence was overwhelming. By New Year's Eve, Dad, still recovering from surgery, accepted a plea deal, guilty to fraud and identity theft, with house arrest pending health evaluations, plus crippling fines that gutted the family's wealth. Bennett Properties entered federal receivership, its assets dissected under court supervision. Ethan and Sophia were cleared of direct involvement but faced their own reckoning. Ethan's reckless investments had fueled Dad's desperation, and Sophia's silence had enabled it. In the fallout, cracks in the Bennett facade became chasms. Mom, shell-shocked, enrolled in therapy and took a part-time job teaching art at a community center, reclaiming a piece of herself Dad had buried. Sophia, freed from Dad's pressure, applied to a master's program in early childhood education, her eyes brighter than I'd seen in years. Ethan, adrift without Dad's shadow, checked into rehab, his first step toward a life not defined by failure. I watched from the sidelines, my JAG meetings a lifeline as I fought to clear my name. The Army audited every contract tied to my clearance, confirming I was a victim, not a conspirator. Captain Hayes called, her voice warm, "You're a hell of a soldier, Bennett. Your unit's waiting when you're ready." As the legal dust settled, I stood on the cabin's porch, the Harpeth River glinting under a cold January sun. Dad's empire was crumbling, but so was the weight I'd carried for a decade. The fight wasn't over, Dad's sentencing loomed, and the family was still fractured, but I'd reclaimed my truth. The next battle would be facing him, not as his daughter, but as the woman who'd exposed his lies. The Bennett mansion in Franklin, Tennessee, loomed like a ghost of my childhood as I pulled into the driveway on January 3, 2026. The colonial facade, once a symbol of untouchable wealth, now felt hollow, its grandeur tarnished by the FBI's raid and Dad's plea deal for fraud and identity theft. After weeks of legal battles, exposing his scheme to forge my Army security clearance for military contracts, I'd avoided this place, staying at my cabin by the Harpeth River. But Mom's quiet plea, delivered over coffee, echoed, "He's asking for you, Claire." Dad, Richard Bennett, was out of the hospital, confined to house arrest post-stroke, his empire in ruins. I wasn't here to forgive, I was here to face the man who tried to frame me, to see if any piece of the father I'd once idolized remained. Inside, the air was stale, the grand staircase dim without its usual chandelier glow. Mom led me to the master bedroom, where Dad lay propped against pillows, an oxygen tube snaking under his nose. The titan who'd once commanded boardrooms looked frail, his face gaunt, eyes sunken. "Claire," he rasped, his voice a shadow of its former boom. I stood at the foot of the bed, my posture rigid, a soldier's instinct. "Sir," I replied, the words sharp, deliberate. His wince was subtle, but I caught it. "Don't call me that," he said, a flicker of the old Richard surfacing. "I'm your father." "Are you?" I shot back, my voice low, cutting. "You haven't been for 10 years. Not since you threw me out, and definitely not when you forged my name to save your lies." His hands trembled on the blanket, but I pressed on, the contract from Grandma Margaret's email vivid in my mind. "You used my service, my honor, to scam the Army. Then you set me up to take the fall." The silence was heavy, broken only by the beep of his heart monitor. His eyes, once cold, glistened with something new, regret, maybe, or shame. I was desperate, he admitted, his voice cracking. The business was dying. I thought I could fix it, keep the family together. By destroying me. My voice rose, years of pain spilling out. You told me not to come home, Dad. You texted fine back like I was nothing. He looked away, tears trailing down his cheek. I was wrong, he whispered. I was proud of you, Claire, your strength, your courage. I just couldn't say it. The admission hit like a shockwave, stirring memories of him cheering at my soccer games. But it wasn't enough. That doesn't erase what you did, I said, softer now, my anger ebbing into exhaustion. It's a start, he murmured, meeting my gaze. If you'll let it be. I didn't forgive him, not yet. But as I left, the door closing on his frail figure, a fragile thread of possibility lingered. Healing would take time, but I'd faced worse odds in war. The January wind whipped across Franklin, Tennessee, as I stood outside the Franklin Community Center, a modest brick building dwarfed by the shadow of my family's crumbling legacy. It was January 10, 2026, a week after my tense meeting with Dad, where his frail apology had left a crack in the wall between us. The legal fallout from his fraud, forging my Army clearance for military contracts, had stripped Bennett Properties bare, but it had also freed me from the weight of his expectations. My name was clear, my career intact, yet I felt a new mission stirring. The Army had taught me to build teams under fire, and now I wanted to build something here, in the town that had both rejected and shaped me. With my leave extended, I had a chance to leave a mark beyond the battlefield. I'd teamed up with Jake Miller, the electrician who'd first hinted at Dad's shady deals, and Lauren Parker, my high school friend whose grocery store gossip had sparked my investigation. Together, we launched a veteran support group at the community center, a safe haven for soldiers returning to civilian life, wrestling with fractured families or lost purpose. The first meeting was small, 6 vets, including a wiry Marine named Tom, whose haunted eyes mirrored my own after Iraq. I shared my story, voice steady but raw, Dad's betrayal, the forged contracts, the hospital showdown. I thought family defined me, I said, but I found strength in standing alone, and in people like you. Tom nodded, then spoke of his own estranged brother, his words halting but heavy. Lauren poured coffee, Jake cracked jokes, and slowly, the room warmed with shared scars. As we locked up, a news van idled nearby, a reporter sniffing for more Bennett drama. I ignored it, my focus on the group. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a lifeline, proof that community could rise from ruin. The fight for my family wasn't over, but here, I was building a new one. The Harpeth River glittered under a January sunset, its ripples catching the last light as I sat on the porch of my Franklin, Tennessee, cabin. It was January 15, 2026, and the past month had been a war zone of its own, Dad's text banishing me from home, his fraud with my Army clearance exposed, his stroke, and a family fractured by truth. The legal battles had ended with his plea deal, the veterans group I'd started with Jake and Lauren was growing, and my brief meeting with Dad had left a fragile hope for healing. But as I opened my journal, pen scratching against paper, I realized this journey wasn't just about surviving betrayal, it was about rewriting my story. That single word I texted back, fine, wasn't surrender, it was defiance, a declaration that I'd define my worth, not Dad's rejection or the Bennett name. Here's the lesson I etched into those pages: your value isn't chained to those who turn you away. Rejection, as brutal as it feels, can be a compass, guiding you to your truest self. I'd spent a decade chasing Dad's approval, only to find strength in the Army, in strangers like Sarah Brooks, in a community of vets building each other up. If you're watching this, feeling trapped by family expectations or a past that won't let go, know this: you are enough. Stand your ground, even when it shakes the world around you. I need you to join me now. Drop a comment below. When did you say, fine, and mean it? What moment set you free? If this story hit you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and let's keep this fight alive. The road's messy, but it's yours. Take it.